The Baltimore Ravens will be featured on Hard Knocks once again. We talk about pros and cons, potential key storylines, and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty to talk about here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you so much for being here today on this Taco Tuesday, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day and a part of your day in general. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your show. So be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. You're not missing any content, whether you watch in video form or listen in audio form. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Monday through Friday, plus bonus episodes as well. We have your daily Ravens fix of content as we talk about news, analysis, updates. Again, the whole thing with this Baltimore Ravens team, even in this lull period of the offseason. OTAs done, minicamp done, training camp a lot of weeks away. We still are going strong here 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens. So if you're an everydayer, thank you for tuning in every single day. If you are new to the channel, welcome in. Hopefully you will enjoy the content. And if you like it, be sure to stick around, be a part of the community here, which we're growing. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome in. We have lots to dive into today. On today's show, the Baltimore Ravens featured on Hard Knocks again. Obviously, they were the inaugural team in 2001. They are back alongside their AFC North counterparts. We'll be talking about just generally what that means, but also some pros and cons to potentially, what it could mean for the Ravens and all the benefits to it. There might be some things that some people might not be super happy about with it. So we're talking about that. And then we'll also talk about maybe some key storylines that at that time in the year could be going on. And if the Ravens have a plan in general, because we do have some lull downtime before training camp starts. Are they going to make any moves? What's their plan moving forward? So we have a lot to talk about. And again, it's like, I know some people are saying, Kevin, are you really doing a pros and cons Hard Knocks episode? Look, there was so much excitement for this announcement. I think everybody is, I shouldn't say everybody. Most people are very excited about this. This is the biggest story here on Locked On Ravens. We talk about the biggest stories for the Baltimore Ravens every single day. So this was the biggest story of yesterday, and I want to talk about it here today. So, again, there's not really much else going on in Ravens town right now in Baltimore, so might as well talk about this, which, again, got a lot of people excited. So let's just talk about generally first what is going on for those who might have missed it or, just got the general announcement but don't know details. The Ravens, alongside, of course, AFC North, so it's Steelers, Bengals, and Browns, they're all going to be featured on the in-season version of Hard Knocks. So obviously, as Hard Knocks has evolved, there are now different sections of it, different seasons or whatever you want to call it, different shows, I guess, of Hard Knocks, where they do obviously the preseason one and the, everything leading up to, everything. But the Ravens are going to be on the in-season version with their division. Now, that means that I think the first episode is going to air December 3rd. So if my math serves me correctly, that will be the final 6 weeks of the season that the Ravens will be featured on Hard Knocks. That will feature a couple divisional matchups. But the goal here, why the NFL did this, is to make sure that people can see, because again, they're looking for storylines. The big storyline is, look, every team in this division had a winning record last season. What's that division race going to look like this year? I think a lot of people are expecting, with the Ravens and how dominant they were last season, the Bengals getting Joe Burrow back. I'm sure the NFL is hoping Deshaun Watson can bounce back, although for the Ravens' sake, I hope that's not the case. And then you have the Steelers with Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and that new quarterback room. There are a lot of storylines there. So look, in terms of like the NFL grabbing an entertaining and attention-grabbing thing, yeah, I think they did a great job here. So pretty much why the Ravens are, I guess, quote-unquote, forced to do this. I think a lot of teams don't love doing Hard Knocks. I'm sure no team actually likes doing it. We'll talk about that in the second part of the show. But there are actually requirements, or there actually were, and they were revised about doing Hard Knocks. So it's interesting because when you talk about what some of these things are and like the requirements, it used to be you had to not appear on Hard Knocks over the last 10 seasons. So this is just for, the regular show. Any team that appeared on Hard Knocks in the last 10 years, if you had made the playoffs at any point over the last 2 seasons, those were rules. And they said, okay, you can decline if that happens. Now, there are new rules for teams that are doing the offseason version, I think, which is they have a first-year head coach in place. You don't have to be on the show. Participating in the in-season show during the upcoming year or the following season, don't have to be on the show. They appear on Hard Knocks in the past 8 years, so knocking that from 10 to 2, or 10 to 2, 10 to 8. They took off 2 years. There we go, from 10 to 8. So it took off 2 years there. Now, I don't believe there are restrictions for the in-season one. I think that you can just, like the NFL can say, hey, you're doing this. I'm not positive on that. I tried looking it up. I couldn't find anything. But I believe that the in-season version is different than the off-season / preseason version of Hard Knocks. And again, as we'll talk about in the second part of the show, there, at least for John Harbaugh, there are some cons that we'll talk about. But in terms of the pros, again, I think this is just, especially from like people who cover the team, a fan perspective, whatever, perspective you want to talk about, this is going to be a really intriguing 6 weeks because I think everybody expects this division to be super competitive down to week 18. I know it wouldn't shock me if the division race came down to the final couple weeks of the season. Wouldn't shock me at all. But I also think that one of the definite pros to this is for a lot of these players. I mean, look, again, the Ravens haven't been on Hard Knocks since the inaugural season in 2001. And that is when obviously Shannon Sharp, Tony Siragusa, rest in peace to Goose. But a lot of these guys, that was the inaugural season. Sometimes it can be a hit. Sometimes it can be a dud. It can really go both ways. The Ravens, that season is still talked about to this day. There are multiple viral clips of, I think Goose locking Shannon Sharp in the trailer, the tight ends in the trailer or something. And, that whole situation where that clip is still with the impersonation of, when they had the rookies had to go up there and they did their impressions, and one of it was Shannon Sharp, and him and Ray Lewis are cracking up. There are moments in Hard Knocks that can live forever. There are certainly those moments from the Ravens inaugural season in 2001, and hopefully this will deliver on that. Now, again, they're going to be splitting time with 3 other teams, 4 including themselves. So there aren't going to be, hopefully for their sake, as many cameras or whatnot, which again, I'm kind of teasing. I'm doing a little teasers for that second part of the show. But for some of these players that might not be widely nationally recognized, like everybody knows Lamar Jackson. Everybody knows TJ Watt, Myles Garrett. There are plenty of guys, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, like we can go on and on and on. But for some of these players that might, in Baltimore circles, yeah, we know who Keaton Mitchell is. We know who Isaiah Likely is. And while those guys might have some national attention, I feel like this is an opportunity for even guys who have less national attention than that to, people can learn about their personalities. People can learn about their stories and kind of the inner workings of things. And Hard Knocks, the point of it is to tell a story and to capture moments that can tell a intriguing and attention-grabbing story. And when you have these 4 teams that, are going to probably be in the thick of a playoff race, there is an intensity factor to it. But then it's also about, well, how can we tell if you're Hard Knocks, you're saying, how can we tell a story? And you're trying to get the players' personalities in there. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a camera on Lamar Jackson at all times and all these star players at all times. What I would really like to see from this is, and this isn't just about the Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Steelers as well, the spotlight on some of these lesser known players and to kind of have, because I think that this can do well for them. This can be a moment for them or multiple moments from this show. But then you also get the behind the scenes look of everything, where I think when you're talking about if you're curious about how an organization functions and what these meetings look like and practices and like what goes on during regular season, usually that is so airtight and there are bits and pieces and glimpses throughout the year where, again, NFL Films does a great job. The Ravens themselves, their media team with Ravens Wire, they do a great job too. But now you have that and you have Hard Knocks. So it's NFL Films, Ravens Wired, Hard Knocks, all in that, for Hard Knocks is only the 6 week span, but That's a lot. That's a lot of inside access and inside information where, or not information, but you get inside access to it, right? Where you get stuff you wouldn't have seen before, or just, to the field, interviews, that stuff you don't get. So I think there are pros to it. Plus, I think I know this is definitely a reach, but maybe it can give them some motivation type deal, right? Maybe cameras help in a way. They could certainly hurt, but I don't know how it works. I mean, every team, every player is wired different. Maybe having the cameras in there will help some guys. I don't know how that will work, and whether that's motivation or some other way, I'm not sure. But again, we're talking about potential pros here. I would go out on a limb, which is not really that, and saying that that's probably not going to happen. I feel like the cameras will be cameras. They're not going to get distracted. They're going to be laser focused in, but it will give us an opportunity. So I'm super excited for this. I think a lot of other people do share that as well. So Ravens, again, are on Hard Knocks. They will be on the in-season version, and going to be exciting to see what different coverage we get of this Ravens team. Another angle, another look. And I think, again, it's going to be really cool, in my opinion. So coming up for the second part of the show, we'll talk about some cons, the other side of the story. Are there things that the organization won't like? I will tell you, there certainly will be. So be sure to stay tuned to talk about here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summertime means baseball at the NBA Finals and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. So we know who the Finals MVP is right now. Jaylen Brown, the Celtics. Congratulations to them. They win the NBA championship over the Dallas Mavericks. So that is now said and done. Jaylen Brown officially wins that. But MLB, you got the All-Star game coming up, MVP race in full swing, Gunnar Henderson, Aaron Judge. So if you want to bet on that, head on over to FanDuel. Plus, for football, it is coming up. The Ravens open up with 2.5-point underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Tuesday. Again, appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Also, be sure to make Locked On Sports Today a part of your day. Peter Bukowski, he takes you across the sports world, all of it, every single Monday through Friday. So be sure to check out Peter over on Locked On Sports Today, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, we talked about some of the pros to Hard Knocks, right? I think it's a cool experience for the guys and being able to show some personality, and maybe some of these underrated players or guys might not have a lot of national media attention, getting that attention or being able to show who they are. But then you have some of these cons, and there are certainly a few of them, as John Harbaugh went on the Adam Jones podcast and was asked about Hard Knocks. Jerry Coleman, Adam Jones do a great job over there, and Harbaugh was asked about the Hard Knocks situation and just, the potential of if they were to get it. And Harbaugh said that, look, he said he told the team, he's going to tell his team that just be you, we're going to be us, and go about our business and our day, but did talk about how to him it is a little bit of a distraction because there is a camera in your face all the time. And again, I think splitting it with 3 other teams does, I would hope that would lessen it a little bit, because it's just not as much content, right? It's different trying to put together that length of amount of time, that show length. It's different to put together a show for one team as opposed to 4 teams, right? That's 3 other teams you have to put content in there for. And I'm sure, look, some of the weeks there'll be more Ravens than Browns. Other weeks there'll be more Steelers than Bengals. And then there'll be more, Bengals than Ravens, and then Ravens than Steelers. Like, there will be different levels of it each week. But I think that will change it to the point where, it's not just being hyper-focused on the Ravens, because then, yes, there will be a camera there all the time and figuring things out. And again, maybe it's just a thing where they get as much footage as they can, they narrow it down, and it doesn't really make that big of a difference. Maybe that's what happens, right? But at least I could hope, and especially for John Harbaugh's sake, that maybe the fact that it's 3 other teams makes it a little bit less of that, okay, camera in your face all the time. But of course, it's not going to take away from the fact that there will be a camera there. And he also mentioned, I do think that, and Harbaugh said it too, I believe that the teams have some level of like editing powers in this whole thing to say like, oh, we don't want that out. That's a competitive advantage for us. Or if you get that out, it's a competitive advantage for our opponents. I don't exactly know how that works, so I don't want to say anything absolute, but there has to be some level of like, if you're a team, and this is kind of me like, putting the tin foil hat on and being like, all right, what does it mean? If I'm a team, especially, that your division rival is going to be on this thing, I'm watching every single episode and I'm trying to find any little nuance that I can that can help my team get a competitive advantage. If I'm the Ravens, I'm watching the Steelers segments, I'm watching the Bengals, I'm watching the Browns, and I'm saying, is there any little thing in here? And they're probably, look, in the grand scheme of things, is there going to be something that can give the Ravens a huge advantage? Maybe, right? Maybe it happens, but I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. But I would definitely try. I would definitely try. So Harbaugh also talked a little bit about how it's also just draining, right? To have a camera in your face the whole time and to kind of have that all around for a bunch of the time. That can be very draining, and it can be tough to have to go through that and again, you try to quote unquote, right, ignore it as best as you can, and the distraction element of it, like just, you're going out there, you're playing football, you're practicing, your meetings, you're doing your thing, but it can be tough, and it's only going to be 6 weeks for them, like from December 3rd on. So it's not like they're going to be there for the full season, right? At this point, and we'll talk about this in the final part of the show, there will be developed storylines and things along of that nature, but the distraction element, you hope you can, if you're a team, you can tune it out. Now, I'm sure when you talk about Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Steelers, some will probably do it better than others. Maybe there's something going on with a player or a team that amplifies that. I don't know. But I think that you can kind of tell that Harbaugh's just kind of like, if it happens, it is what it is, but definitely not a preference. And look, I don't know if there is a team out there who would want it, if we're being honest. I think that, again, these rules are in place to say, hey, you can decline if this happens or this happens or this happens. And a lot of teams, they do. And we talked about this. I'm also a part of the Ryan Ripken show, and we had a conversation about it. And we talked about, the series quarterback, right? And like the wide receiver series and a bunch of other series that have come out, and, you have a camera in your face the whole time. And after season 1 of quarterback, there was this huge drop off in terms of who wanted to do it for season 2. And a lot of that is probably just because like it's a draining thing to have that happen and to have like all that happening every single day. And they're trying to come up with the best content they can because they have to for the show. And like, you're trying to do your thing off to the side, like working out, meetings, practice, etc. That can be tough. So again, I think the Ravens are a good enough team, and they're, I think their players understand, the coaching staff understands that it should just be a minor thing, right? It's not going to be like it's not there. Of course, there will be the cameras will be there. It'll be in their faces, and that's going to be an element. And they're going to have to learn how to navigate around that. But at the end of the day, it shouldn't be a big deal, right? There should be very minimal distraction with this. If they want to get to where they want to go, they can't let it be a distraction. They can't. This is the most important time. You're talking about last 6 weeks, December, the beginning of December on. You can't have distractions in December, right? If you have distractions in December and you're letting that affect you, what's that going to be in the playoffs, right? Get to the playoffs, you had something distract you for 6 weeks. Is your mojo thrown off? Is your timing thrown off? So you cannot let it be a big deal if you're the Ravens. I don't expect it to be a big deal for Baltimore. I think they're just going to go about their business, be them, as John Harbaugh said, and it is what it is. But there are definitely pros, there are definitely cons to it, both from, a media fan perspective and from an organizational perspective, although I feel like most of the pros kind of fall in the I shouldn't say that. There are some player pros to it, and I guess coaching pros as well, if you want to talk about like exposure and everything. But is there an overexposure element? That I think is a kind you got to kind of keep in mind. But I do think again, I don't know about the whole editing power thing and like who has the final say in that, and if there is any like veto power on content for the teams. I tried to look it up. I could not find it. But yeah, either way, you're looking at something that will help a lot of people understand what goes on, the nuances of an NFL season, especially that late in a season as you kind of gear up for a playoff push. And I think it's going to be fun. I personally think it's going to be fun. I know the organization might have some other views on it, but I think to me, and just being able to learn a bit more about the organization, a bit more about the players and everything, and being able to get those nuances, I think it will be to the benefit of a lot of different people. And if the organization doesn't make it a distraction, it doesn't have to be one. Doesn't have to be one. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about what storylines could be happening at that point in the season. Plus, we'll talk a bit about if the Ravens have a plan, kind of previewing that for training camp, which is coming up again. Still got a little ways to go for that, though. So be sure to stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday, and really appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day as always, and be sure to subscribe in video form and audio form as well. I've been the host of the show for almost 5 years now. We started off in audio form, and then after a couple years, we added video form to the equation, and both communities have been absolutely incredible. Plus, obviously, on social media, I'm starting up my Instagram again. At least I'm trying to, so be sure to follow me over on Instagram and Twitter, of course, at KOstriker34. Now, when speaking of Hard Knocks, we look at when it starts, right? December 3rd. So right at the beginning of December, right when that playoff push is going to be real, or at least get really real for the Ravens. I've thought about potential storylines that could be a thing at that point. I think one of them, I mean, look, that's the obvious one, is where do the Ravens sit in the standings? What's their record? Are they gunning for the division, gunning for a wild card spot, number one seed again? Like, where are they going to be? And that's going to be the entire division, because, again, this is not just Baltimore on Hard Knocks. It is every team in the AFC North. So I think when you're talking about what could be huge, it is, all right, well, that Ravens and Steelers matchup late in the season, how much of a playoff implication does that have? Every divisional matchup is going to have some level of, all right, could a team play spoiler, or what's going on with the division winner? But I think another one is going to be injuries, where for every team, look, I mean, we're not going to shy away from this here, right? I mean, every team goes through injuries, hopefully, knock on wood, and there's that knock, that the Ravens do not have a ton this season. It's inevitable that every team will have them. Every team that plays football, every team that plays sports goes through injuries. But as we have seen with Baltimore, outside of last year in the Lamar Jackson era, for the most part, even like, before last year, those last like 3 or 4 years, there were a lot of season-ending injuries, which impacted, I always say it, I've said this a ton, if you're an everyday, you've heard me say it before, injuries impact both your ceiling and your floor as an organization for that year. And, sometimes even far in the future, based off how serious the injury is, whether that can have long-term, maybe career implications. So if the Ravens maybe had a year injury, or have a year next year like they did last year, which again, they were, I want to make it clear, they were still injured last season. It was just a different type of injured. If you're an everydayer, you're probably sick of me saying this. I'm going to say it again. Baltimore, those season-ending injuries they had those past 3-4 years, it was different because this past season, they had a lot of guys miss 3 weeks and then come back, miss a month and then come back, a month and a half and come back. It was shorter absences to the point where the Ravens only had 3 key guys miss the season. It was J.K. Dobbins, it was David Ajabo, and it was Keaton Mitchell. Those are the 3 guys. Everybody else, I mean, even though we can say Mark Andrews is not 100% healthy in the championship game, Marlon Humphrey was not 100% healthy in that championship game, they were back. They were not placed on season-ending IR. Mark Andrews' story still is crazy to me, how he was able to come back and even play in that game at all. But it's just going to be interesting to see in what these rosters look like at that point on December 3rd if the Ravens make a trade. I mean, this is so far into the future, guys. I mean, we can go and we can maybe do like a look back. I'm going to try to remind myself of future me, December me. So we're talking 6 months from now, right before the end of the year, go back and maybe take a look at this episode again and look at what I was saying and say, look, whenever we do that, usually I'm just dead wrong. So hopefully the Ravens, I didn't really say anything crazy, but I think for the storylines, it's probably going to be also like, how's Lamar Jackson playing, right? Is he living up to expectations? Is he leading the Ravens and, all this different stuff? And is he, Rashad Bateman is going to be a storyline. It's all the stuff we've been thinking about and like, what's going to happen? We're going to pretty much know the answer to all of those when it's all said and done, when Hard Knocks begins. And that will probably drive a lot of what the show is. And that's for all the teams, right? For Baltimore, it's going to be their biggest storylines and what ends up going on. But Steelers, Bengals, and Browns will be the exact same thing. So there's a lot of potential here for really good storytelling and just really good understanding for a lot of people of what this Ravens team is at that point, and then the evolution of them, because that team will be at a certain point on December 3rd when that first episode airs. The team they will be when Hard Knocks ends will be a different team. Maybe they will be in the playoffs. Maybe they won't be. It'd be a very big disappointment, by the way, if they were not in the playoffs. We'd have to have very serious conversations if that were the case. Maybe they'll have that first seed again. They'll be in a bye week. They'll be gearing up for a playoff matchup. Whatever it may be, their arc, because an arc is not just something that, you peak at a certain time. And there are a bunch of different things that go into an arc, the peaks and valleys of a season, right? Going about and learning about what you need to improve on, embracing your strengths. And I think another big thing is going to be Derrick Henry. Trenton Simpson, like all those positional battles that we are talking about right now. Who won those and how are they doing 3-4 months into the season? That's going to be really, really big. So I'm excited for Hard Knocks. We'll continue talking about it throughout the rest of the week. But just to wrap up the show very quickly, I also wanted to talk about if the Ravens do have some sort of a plan over these next couple weeks before training camp starts. We'll talk about this more, whether it's sometime this week or next week. We do have some time to kind of filter in some of these episodes about the Ravens in general, as again, unless there is a move made, there won't really be news. But again, it's something I kind of prefaced on yesterday's show about this is just a different Ravens roster and a different Ravens situation this year, where they signed a lot of vets towards the end of the offseason last year. And I don't know if it's going to be the same this year. I think their plan is probably just letting guys get their rest, getting guys back in the facility for training camp and going from there. I wouldn't be shocked if they made 1 or 2 moves. I'd be shocked if they made like 5 or 6. Like, again, if you want to list off the guys, Arthur Millette, Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, that was in season, but, other guys as well. It's just like all these guys getting signed there. They could do it. Like, again, do I think they need safety depth? Yeah, I do. I think it would benefit them to go out there and bring in some safety depth, because right at this point, look, Sanusi Kane has had some great workouts during OTAs and minicamp, and Ardarius Washington apparently is turning heads, and they're going to look internally before they feel like they have to go external, and that's fine. But Geno Stone was a big part of that defensive turnaround last year. I think everybody knows that. With when Marcus Williams was injured, Geno came in and there was no drop-off. They brought in Jamal Adams for a visit. That's not necessarily Geno's skill set, but Marcus Williams, hopefully he has a healthy season in him, because if he goes down, the Ravens are going to have to rely on a bunch of young talent, which can work. It can work. I'm not trying to count these guys out or anything, right? I think it just gives me more stability if there was another vet in that room that those younger guys could work off of. So it's nothing against the young guys. I'm trying to say this as clear as I can. It is nothing against those guys. I think they can contribute. I just think it would make the room a little safer. I'd just say safer if they had some backup depth behind Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton. That was not, rookie guys, second-year guys, third-year guys, or guys trying to prove themselves. But sometimes that's just how it goes when you have a quarterback on as big of a contract as you do. And I'm not trying to blame the contract situation or whatever, because it's not just Lamar. They have a lot of other guys on big contracts. Obviously, Lamar's is the biggest, but we'll see, because the Ravens right now have about $6 million in cap space. That's not a ton to bring guys in, but I'm sure they could find some money elsewhere if they wanted to. So do they have a plan? I'm sure they have a plan, but is that plan signing everybody on the face of the earth? Probably not. So we'll see what they end up doing, and if there's anything on the horizon for them over these next couple of weeks. That's all I have here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Of course, we bring you 5 days a week of Ravens content, so be sure to subscribe, follow along here, video form, audio form. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.